Evening and welcome to United States Decides 2024, the special show in TeleSUR English in which we'll be bringing you all the information, the analysis, and everything you need to know about the election in the United States that is taking place tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th. My name is Belen de Santos, and with me, bringing all the data regarding the electoral process, is our very own Gladys Quesada. Welcome, Gladys.
Thank you, Belen, for this introduction and also for the welcoming to our audience. And yes, we will be giving you all the details, the figures, the breakdown of those data that are so complicated but define this election, this key election in the United States 2024. Also, follow us in our socials. We will be there giving you all the intel and, the underbelly of this election also. Back to you, Bel.
Also joining us here is international analyst and professor Danny Sho, former professor at the City University of New York, who was sadly fired after 20 years for defending the Palestinian cause. Welcome, Danny. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Belen. Thank you, Gladys.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And we are also joined by our special envoy, Carlos Montero, who is with us from Washington, D.C. Hello, Carlos. Thank you for being with us as well.
Thank you very much for having me here in this show.
Thank you, Carlos. And just how important it is to have the testimony from where everything is taking place. The world's eyes are on the United States this week for an election process that is set to define the coming years for the country and impact the rest of the world. Join us for all the analysis, reactions, and key information. This is United States Decides 2024. And we begin with the information, and just to keep us on track with everything that's going on, we go live now with our correspondent Carlos Montero, who is now in Washington, D.C. Hello, Carlos. Bring us all the information. What is happening there? How is the Capital District preparing themselves for the election day tomorrow?
Tomorrow is going to be a big day, absolutely. It's going to be a day that the whole world is watching at the USA. And what's going to happen tomorrow is the big question. The polls are very close. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump today, they have a really busy day trying to convince their followers that's necessary a change in what's going on in this country. Kamala Harris used all her energy in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a state that many people, many specialists consider that could define this election. She was in a Spanish restaurant talking to the people who were there eating, the owner of the place. She was talking to different people of the community, and the big closing event is going to be very soon. It's going to be in a few minutes, where she's going to be with a lot of celebrities. It's going to be there Oprah Winfrey, Lady Gaga, among others that they don't tell us so far. A lot of celebrities from Hollywood, they are supporting Kamala Harris. Donald Trump, on the other hand, he spent his day, very busy day too, was in 3 states, also 3 states that could define their states. We have to be very careful tomorrow when we have our special coverage here at TeleSUR, TeleSUR Spanish, TeleSUR English, that first he started the morning in North Carolina. He was in Raleigh. Then he went to Pennsylvania. There was in 2 towns of Pennsylvania. And then he's going to finish his night. It's going to be his last act. It's going to be in Michigan, where he's going to try to convince people that USA needs a change, that Biden, the 4 years, they didn't work, and let's see what's going on. But I know you don't have much time, and I want to give you the chance to talk to my guest, Calvin Dark, political analyst. He's from North Carolina. He lives in Argentina, and he knows pretty well what's going on. What do you think about what we are going to expect from tomorrow's election, Calvin?
Well, we know that the result is going to be close. We know that, as you said, there are 7 swing states, very key swing states, and we'll be looking at those results. We won't know any results until around 8 o'clock. My state, North Carolina, will probably be among the first. But if it's really, really close, we won't know tomorrow night. But if it's not close, we may know tomorrow night.
North Carolina is going to go red or blue. What do you think?
I think that there's a good chance that Kamala Harris will win because Trump won against Biden by just a little over 1%. And so she only has a little bit more to recover to be able to defeat.
Your specialty is communication. To talk about the communication, it was crazy during those campaigns. Kamala Harris, yesterday, Sunday, she said, you know, I'm tired of this. She didn't mention in the last Donald Trump, we have to build bridges. We don't have to burn the bridges. Donald Trump, there were so many things, I don't know where to start. Today, he said, for instance, that they don't believe in the polls. They are liars. The New York Times, who present a poll that he was a little bit behind Kamala, they are my enemy. He said that, no, he didn't say that, but a comedian in one of his meetings said that Puerto Rican, they live in an island, there is an island full of trash. Then he, with a microphone, he was pretending, acting like if he were doing oral sex. I mean, what do you think about communication of Donald Trump and why? Why don't you explain us why there are so many Americans who accept that?
I think that Donald Trump, because he's a showman from TV, he can do things that other politicians can't. But I think that politically it's not wise because most people in America know they either want Donald Trump or they don't, want Kamala Harris or they don't. It's these undecided voters that are important. And if you're an undecided voter and you hear those things that you just said about Trump, and then you hear the positive message from Kamala Harris, just changing a few thousand votes could be the difference in this election. So politically, he should stay on message, but he's not.
I don't think he's going to. Calvin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to go back to the studio and remind you we are going to have a special coverage tomorrow from very early until very late, I don't know what time, and also in Spanish, and also we are going to contribute with you guys in English. And before going back, I didn't know about the professor you have as a guest, one who was fired after 20 years. It's really awful that this is happening. All my solidarity with him. Going back with you to the studio.
Thank you, Carlos, for the input and also all the information from the side. Of course, everything is ready for tomorrow, and we'll be seeing, as you were just analyzing, if this is a very close race or not in the end. Thank you. Okay, so now let's get into topic. In the United States, the presidential race is seemingly tied hours before Election Day, as narrow margins of polls results do not show a clear lead of either candidate. But this election is not defined by popular vote, but through an indirect vote that is cast through the Electoral College. What does this mean? How does the Electoral College work? We will begin the discussion with the following material.
The Electoral College is a sort of intrigue for some who don't understand how it works, since its creation as form of indirect election of the president is not a physical place. It is a process that begins with choosing the electors who cast their votes for president and vice president, as well as the counting of votes for Congress. The Electoral College is composed of 538 electors, each state having several electors equal to its seats in Congress. That is, one of each of its members in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Each state chooses its electors in a different way, but generally they are selected by political party or presidential candidate in that state. Although each state is allowed to regulate how the electoral system works, most states implement a winner-take-all system where all electors' votes are awarded to the candidate who wins the state's popular votes. The electoral process begins with the general election, which is held every 4 years of the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. By voting for a presidential candidate, the U.S. citizens are voting for the candidate's preferred constituency. On election day, a prior winner is usually announced on the evening of the same voting date, according to the government's website. After the general elections, the state executives prepare a certificate of certification that lists the names of the designated electors and the votes each individual received. This certificate is sent to the National Archives to become part of the official record of the presidential election. The meeting of the electors takes place in the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December, and electors vote for president and presidents on separate ballots. These votes are recorded on a certificate of votes, which is sent to the Congress and to the National Archives. The electoral votes of each state are at a joint session of Congress on January with a joint session of Congress at under the Vice President of the United States. The votes of the electors are counted and a new president is officially declared. According to the United States National Archive, the president-elect is sworn in as president of the nation on January the 20th of the year following the general elections.
So the Electoral College is one of the key aspects that we need to understand to really comprehend tomorrow's election. But now, how did the system begin?
Okay, Belen, that's a very good question, because many people think that this system is contemporary or is more modern, what instead is really outdated in some point, because it originated in the late 1700s, specifically in 1787, with the Constitutional Convention, after what is named or what is historically known as the American Experiment or the American Revolution. Also, it was loudly praised by Alexander Hamilton, who presented it and said it was excellent because of its advantages. But why and which one are the roots of the system? Well, one of the least known is that the abolition of the slavery or the slavery system in the North afterwards the American Revolution, and the state of the slavery system in the South is the root or is the main cause for the creation of this system. Well, the reason behind this is that the North had a population that was even with the South, but in the South, because of the maintaining of slavery, the black people, the slave population, had not right to vote. So in all the cases, they accounted for the census in the demographics, but they did not account for the political participation. So the South representatives felt they were in disadvantage with the power or the political grip of the North. So one of the ways they found is that they could represent the amount of population they had using the system of representatives in Congress. So that is the racial or maybe the core, the historical core of this kind of system, or the system that later extended to other states in the nation. Also, it is paramount to explain that the Republican Party was founded in 1854, just a little bit later, and the Democratic Party also was founded in 1828. Then we have some data to offer you, because taking into account the racial cause or maybe this root of the system, we have to know now that, for example, we have these little figures there that in the US demographics, according to the 2022 census, which is the last largest census that is, providing the figures to conform the amount of representatives per population ratio in the states. You have that there is a 2.4 people or percent of the total population, which is 333.3 million people in all the states. Okay, so 58.9% of the population considers themselves white, and we have a 14.1% that believes they are Hispanic. And we had other data, but 2.4% considers them multiracial, 0.7% Native, and Native Hawaiians, we have 0.2%. Those are the breakdowns of the population, and we were offering you those data because, taking into account the founding and the roots of the system, we have to know that it has other impacts in today's population and in today's ethnic divisions and share in the population of the US. So, Bel, back to you now. I'm giving you all the data, and I'm letting you to do the analysis.
And that idea, That's the idea, precisely to keep in mind all the difference in the population, right, that you were mentioning, and also in terms of the representativeness that that population might have in this democratic system. So, Professor, I come back to you now. And first, I would like to take the opportunity, as Carlos Montero was just saying, to also express our solidarity here from the act that we mentioned at the beginning and the persecution act that cost you your job for defending the Palestinian cause. I hope that during this week that you'll be joining us, we'll be able to talk a little bit about what that support in this cause means also for U.S. citizens. And also coming to this topic, I wanted to ask you, we're talking about a system, an electoral system that has some problems in representation in terms of not representing the actual direct popular vote. How can we understand this system?
Yeah, thank you for the solidarity. Many of us in the United States, the world know, as professors, as educators, as professionals, have been retaliated against just because we stand against genocide. This system is the history lesson, and I think it's a necessary history lesson because most people in the United States could not explain what you all at TeleSUR just explained. This is something that we inherited from the system of slavery in 1787, and it means that small states have a disproportionate amount of representation in the Senate as well. So a tiny state like a Wyoming or an Iowa would get 2 senators, just like a massive state like California or Texas. It's also very discouraging because if there's a Republican voter in New York, Massachusetts, the Northeast states, the New England states, these are always consistently, historically, blue states or Democratic states. So if you're a Republican in those states, what's your motivation to even participate, and vice versa if you're in Alabama or Mississippi, which are historically Republican. So for me, it's mighty curious. The United States, the government, which touts itself as the greatest democracy in the world, which has invaded Panama, invaded Grenada, invaded the Dominican Republic, invaded Vietnam. Well, you see a pattern. It's invaded basically every country in the world in the name of democracy. And then when we actually reflect, where is our democracy? Most of us in the U.S. fail to really understand what the Electoral College means. There's always petitions and demands that we transcend and evolve beyond this system. But year after year, it's politics as usual. And in fact, this is an anti-politics or an anti-participatory, anti-democracy. So it's important for the world at large to know the contradictions of U.S. democracy, which Malcolm X always reminded us was in fact U.S. hypocrisy.
So we're trying to use this space that we have today, one day before the election day, to really understand what this electoral college system means. So there's been a lot of talk in media over the past days about the occasions in which, for example, the president candidate who got the most amount of votes, who was most voted by the citizens, was not the candidate elected president. How does that math work?
Yeah, the math doesn't work because you have Hillary Clinton had more than 3 million votes more than Trump, but she didn't win. Of course, in 2000, it all came down to Florida, and Al Gore had millions of more votes than George Bush, but somehow George Bush became the president. So I think this is extremely discouraging. And when you try to explain it to young people, it certainly, the math never adds up. There's no serious resolution within either House of Congress to actually change this system. So it's something that we're stuck with for now. And then it comes down to these electors. We don't know who the electors are. The electors are unelected. And in 2016, that came into play because Bernie Sanders in many states won the Democratic primary. But then these electors appointed by the Democratic National Convention were able to say, no, we reject Bernie Sanders for whatever reason, representing the status quo, the establishment of the Democratic Party, and so they went with Hillary Clinton. Once again, a strike against the actual democracy. We should be like so many other countries throughout the world, one vote, one citizen, and that would be more like truly representative democracy.
Excellent. So we'll come back to idea in just a few minutes. Now we have a live report also from another one of our correspondents, that is Henry Camello, who is in New York. Let's listen from him.
The final day of the 2024 presidential campaign is over. Former President Donald Trump had a 90-minute speech full of criticism in North Carolina before attending another in Reading, Pennsylvania, finishing the night in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Donald Trump continued to lean heavily into his anti-immigrant rhetoric, telling his supporters that Kamala Harris has eradicated the southern border. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris concluded her campaign in Pennsylvania by holding rallies in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, followed by a concert in Allentown. When is the 2024 presidential election result expected? In some presidential races, the victor has been named late on the election night or early the next morning. This time, the tie race in many states could mean media outlets wait longer before projecting who has won. Democrat Kamala Harris, the current vice president, and Republican Donald Trump, the former president, have been running neck and neck for weeks. Narrow victories could also mean recounts. In key swing states, Pennsylvania, for example, a statewide recount would be required if there is a half percentage point difference between the voters cast for the winner and the loser. In 2020, the was just over 1.1 percentage points. Democrats who say the numbers overall favor Harris suspect that Trump is preparing to declare victory before all the key states are called. The better to sow confusion when legal challenges commence. According to Professor Alan Lichtman, who has predicted the results of the last 10 presidential elections, Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. He bases his predictions on a metric system named the Key of the White House. This metric system has 13 keys. Professor Lichtman says Kamala Harris has 6 out of the 13 keys. Meanwhile, Trump only has 3 on his favor. In New York and many other states nationwide, poll centers will be open as early as 6 a.m. and will be closing at 9 p.m. We will keep you posted with the latest news. Reporting from New York, Henry Camello, TeleSUR.
Thank you, Henry. We'll be looking forward to upcoming reports throughout this week to really follow on the situation. And also, let's get back to what we were discussing with the professor show right now. Glad you had something?
Yeah, we were speaking and, discussing the role of this system and how it had favored some elites and some in the American society. But I have a question, because as you were addressing, after the system was enforced, 5 times in the elections, in the presidential elections, has happened that one president was elected without the popular vote and only with the electoral college vote. And 5 times, only 4 out of 5 times, was a Republican who won using the system. So I see a pattern, and I see it's easy to notice that the system is favoring one side more than the other. Why?
That's a great question. It certainly favored the Republicans. I think it's important to remember that in the United States, liberalism is hegemonic. I'll offer one concrete example. In polls, 80% of Democrats continue to trust the mainstream media, which for them is CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. But only 20% of Republicans trust what Trump calls the lamestream media. And that's why Trump represents a monkey wrench in the entire system, because he's not doing it from the left, but he's saying from the right wing or the extreme right wing, we don't trust this entire system. And so many of his followers, anything could really happen tomorrow. If Trump is not declared winner, he's already saying, spreading rumors in Pennsylvania that there's fraud. That's what he did in Georgia. He's facing these open cases. We could call these cases lawfare. But liberalism is hegemonic. most are going to vote Democrat, but then that is not the most important number. So Trump still has a chance if he can get some of these key battleground states. They're saying that Nevada, Arizona, these are the unpredictable swing states right now. And they're already predicting that they could take days or even a week to come in. We should remember in 2020, the vote, as always, was on a Tuesday, but it wasn't declared until Saturday. So everyone should remain patient. The results could be in. If it's a landslide, then we could know by tomorrow night at midnight or 2 a.m. But if it goes down as the past elections have, we could be waiting for a number of days.
Okay. So the imbalance between, the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of the outcome of the elections regarding this electoral college, it is clear that it favors maybe those wider states with more population, and because they have more electoral votes, and of course they could make a background for the counting to win the 270 that is mandatory and needed for calling a win in any cases. But there is also something I want to ask you. What about, because we were seeing the racial background of this electoral system, what about those states, because the system of the winner takes it all invalidates, silences the votes of minorities. For example, we know Texas has around 25% of black population, which could be, leaning Democrat as usual and as traditionally it does, because maybe this year there are some changes and that's some demographics we are going to see later. But for now, let's concentrate in one of the traditions they have, voting. So how this electoral system invalidates their political voice in the elections.
The disenfranchisement of different voting sectors manifests in all these different ways. Historically, they've wanted to make sure that African Americans and other marginalized populations can't vote as effectively. There's been a lot of back and forth about having physical ID cards. That was something that was demanded in the South. Historically, it was a reason to invalidate enfranchise many African American voters. And this is going to play out tomorrow. We've seen long lines historically in Ohio and in other communities where people even weren't even able to cast their vote, at least not in a comfortable, timely manner. So these are all things to be completely aware of. And if we look at the map of electoral votes, it gives an outsized, inflated importance to certain states, and then the people within that state that don't vote the way that the majority do, all of those votes are then lost. So it's time for the U.S. government, it's time for the people of the U.S. to continue to pressure so that we can have a truly modern, participatory democracy. In fact, that is the paradox. Many of the countries that the United States targets with sanctions, with blockades, with invasions, with occupations, have systems that through and through are more democratic, more social and economic rights, and that is the justification. That's why they go after these countries like Cuba, like Venezuela, like Zimbabwe, like China, like Vietnam, like Nicaragua, because within their constitution there are enshrined rights that uphold a people's democracy, and this reveals in front of the world that the U.S. is not a democracy. It's a duopoly. There's two corporate parties, both faithful to the same corporate masters. So we, in fact, don't live in a democracy. Rather, we live in a plutocracy.
And we'll come back to directly that idea, not only of the quality of the democracy in the United States, also following this process that we are going through this week, but also thinking about what possibilities are there beyond, if they can be thought beyond the two-party system. We have a short break now, but we'll be right back to continue going over everything, all the analysis as we have so far. Stay tuned. Welcome back to United States Insights, and we continue going over the main points in the election process that will have it point tomorrow, Tuesday. Now, because of this system that we were just describing, 7 states hold the key to the White House. Known as the swing states, these are crucial in the electoral race as they failed to show beforehand a strong lean for either the Democratic or Republican Party. In this swing states, the race is and gets defined at the last minute, and usually by very narrow margins. Let's see the following material.
For the 2024 electoral process, Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and North Carolina are the undecided states that may end up defining the U.S. presidency on November 5th. In the U.S. electoral system, citizens do not directly elect a candidate, but electors who then in turn cast their votes for one of the presidential aspirants. In most cases, whoever wins the popular vote in a state gets all its delegates, as most states have winner-takes-all system. In Arizona, there are 11 delegates. As a border state with Mexico, immigration is at the forefront of voters' concern, especially after record border crossings, although these have declined in recent months. With 19 electoral college votes, the most of any swing state this year, Pennsylvania is foreshadowed to play a key role in the upcoming elections. For the state voters, the economy is a crucial issue. While this is a main source of concern to all citizens of U.S., grocery prices have reportedly risen faster in this area than in any other state in the country over the last year. In Nevada, the economy discourse and prices are also main issue for this swing state that represents its electoral votes. It is one of the states with the highest unemployment rate in the country at about 5.5%. According to the most recent official data from the Nevada Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. The southern western state has one of the largest non-white population in the country, with about 40% of voters being of Latin American, African, or Asian American origin, groups in which Harris has a greater support, but economic concerns may also play in favor of the Republicans. The 16 electoral votes from Georgia are key for either candidate. 1/3 of the state population is African American, one of the largest in the country, and the demographic believed to have been instrumental in Biden's narrow win in that state in 2020. For voters in the swing state of Michigan, which contribute 15 electors, the genocide in Gaza poses a major interest as it has the highest number of Arab American in the country, a demographic whose support for Biden has been at risk because of his backing of Israel's aggression. North Carolina, which delivers 16 electoral votes, shares some of the biggest concern with its neighboring state, Georgia, and also with Arizona, such as immigration and the economy. The state is labeled as undecided ahead of the November 5th elections, even when polling data shows that Democratic electorate of the region have been revitalized, in part due to the fact that over 20% of North Carolinians are black. Voting results for Wisconsin, which awards 10 electoral votes, have been described as nerve-wracking, which comes as no surprise since the vote there has been defined by less than 1% margins in almost every presidential election on the current century, when 20,000 votes can tip the balance in a state of about 6 million people. Any group of voters can make a difference.
Okay, so Professor Sho, we're now getting into one of the other hot topics of this election, that is understanding for an international audience what the swing states are, why the discussion is concentrated there, and that is one of the things that has been dominating the discourse in the media. So now that we've discussed how the electoral process works and why the discussion is concentrated on those states in particular, what do you think could be the main topics to tilt that election in those states and the things that we are going to see tomorrow?
Some of those states are in the Midwest, This is what they call Trump country. And as odious as Trump is, let's not forget what created the Trump phenomenon. And that's the neoliberal Democrats who have abandoned the Midwest. There's a certain anti-establishment feeling across the Midwest, particularly in these swing states of Michigan and Wisconsin. They know that the Hillary Clintons and the Obamas and these ruling class families, the Bidens, they know that they're fake. They can see, Kamala Harris out there campaigning and smiling everywhere. Same thing with Trump putting on a hard hat. There's no authenticity, there's no sincerity. There's a concept in the United States that comes from social media that we should all study. It's called profilicity. It's not what you actually do in real life, like judge a human being by their actions type mentality. Profilicity is based on what is your profile on social media, on television, on X. What does it project? And of course, anyone can project any type of appearance, but appearance versus reality. What's the reality? Trump puts on this hard hat. Workers in the Midwest know, though, Trump is worth anywhere between $4 to $8 billion. He's never had to put on a hard hat. He's never had to work construction. Neither of these candidates are really relatable. And I think that's why scores of the American population tomorrow won't vote, which is a vote unto itself, a boycott vote, or they'll vote for Dr. Cornel West or Dr. Jill Stein or a third-party candidate. When we get into Arizona, and this also relates to North Carolina, to Georgia and the Midwestern states, the issue of immigration. Trump is the scapegoater in chief. He's the demagogue in chief. And what Trump does is he says the most eccentric, sensationalistic things. Of course, the primary example was in the debate last month, he told all of America and the world that if Kamala Harris wins, hundreds of millions of illegal aliens, he uses a whole degrading vocabulary for our neighbors to the south, that they said that they would stream in and they would be eating people's pets. And that to us may be laughable, but I can't tell you how many families back in Ohio or Indiana, in the Midwest that also exists. There's a Midwest in upstate New York. There's a Midwest in central Massachusetts. By Midwest, I mean the underdog, the workers who worked in industry a generation ago, but all of that industry left for China or for Central America where they could exploit workers much more. So Trump has this odious rhetoric, and if you all remember, Kamala Harris was on the podium, and she was just as outraged as all of us, and she was looking at Trump like, how dare you saying this about Haitians and about immigrants? But simultaneously, as that happened, who's invading Haiti? Who's occupying Haiti? Who has sent these Kenyan and Bahamian mercenaries to occupy Haiti in the name of the United States with our taxpayer money, $333 million. So there's so much fakeness about Kamala. I think a huge part of the voters know that it's almost a type of science fiction that if Joe Biden was to, in a science fiction-esque way, rip off his face, his mask, and there was Kamala Harris, the appearance changes, the identity politics change, but the actual policies, the concrete things the American people care about doesn't change. So tomorrow at the end of the day is really a vote between Tweedledee, Tweedledum, stomach cancer or liver cancer. Whoever wins tomorrow, the American people lose.
I ask you, Professor, to hold that thought because we will come back to those ideas. And now we welcome one of our special guests of the night, that is Dan Kovalik, who joins us tonight also to continue analyzing the event that is happening tomorrow, that has already been happening. Dan is a lawyer and professor specialized in human rights. Welcome to United States Decides. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Dan, I would like you to ask you, just to begin, one of the most relevant issues that has affected U.S. political life during this year has been the rejection towards the support of Israel we've seen demonstrations that have been unprecedented, at least in the past years. I would like to ask you your opinion on how this could impact the electoral process that we are going on and that we are analyzing tonight.
Yeah, I think it may spell the defeat of Kamala Harris. Because in states like Michigan, you mentioned was an important swing state, you mentioned had the largest Arab American community. By and large, the Arab American community will not vote for her. They will either vote for Trump or they will vote for a third party. I don't know one. I know many Palestinians. I know many other Arabs in my life. I don't know one that's going to vote for Harris because they're not going to vote for a genocidaire. I'm not going to vote for a genocidaire. I'm going to vote. I already voted by mail. I voted for Jill Stein, third party. By the way, I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I'm in Pennsylvania swing state. Donald Trump is literally right across the street. Right, I can see the building he's in right now. Kamala Harris is just up the river. So my city and my state are some of the most central, most important voting areas in the country. And again, I know many people that will just not vote for Kamala Harris because of the support she and Biden have had for the genocide. And, you know, we are people who otherwise might have voted for them, right? Might have voted Democrat because we tend to be more liberal on other issues, but we're not going to do that. So I think she could end up losing because of that one issue.
Exactly. So making a point of what you were saying, there's been a lot of discussion, for example, in the past days of these candidates, the Republican Democrat candidates, trying to win that Arab vote in the swing states. But moving past the election itself, are we looking at different scenarios regarding the genocide in the Middle East with these two alternatives?
I mean, no, probably. Is there a difference between the two major candidates? Probably not. I mean, Trump was terrible on the Palestinian issue. He moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which was a very provocative act to the Palestinians. He cut off aid to UNRWA, if you recall. Of course, so did the U.S. Congress, with Biden signing into law a bill that said that the U.S. can't supply UNRWA till 2025. But the point is, both parties are trying to compete with each other as to who is more pro-Zionist. So I think on that issue, probably there's no difference. But again, I think for me and other activists around the Gaza issue and Palestine issue, our problem is that the party right now in power are the Democrats, and they're the ones carrying out the genocide. As bad as Trump may be, he's not carrying out the genocide. So we feel we have to punish that party.
So one more thing, just to keep on topic, one of the things that really marked this year, as we were saying, have been the demonstrations in the U.S. that were also spread throughout the world in rejection of the support to the genocide in Palestine. And this fueled for a minute there the construction, the possibility of construction of a political alternative beyond that two-party system, beyond the candidates, as you were saying, both from the Democrat and the Republican Party. So how do you see that possibility at this point?
I mean, that's a long-term project. You know, first of all, we have several third-party candidates, and none of them are going to get more than 1 or 2% of the votes. So we're a long way off to building a political alternative to the two-party system. And of course, our electoral system is built to prevent that. It's built to prevent third parties from growing and having any real impact. So, you know, it's a long way off. I don't see it even happening in the near to medium-term future. What would have to happen is at least that one of the parties would get 5% of the vote, which would allow them to get federal funding for elections. That would help them a lot. But none of the parties are going to do that. So that, you know, is a disappointment. You know, Bobby Kennedy, he was polling at 20% at one time, and then started to decline to something a little less than 10%. But maybe he could have gotten that 5% threshold. But of course, he left the race and supported Trump. So we're left with candidates that are not going to get that 5%. So I don't see an alternative movement, political movement, for some time.
Of course, in any case, that would be, as you were saying, a long-term alternative. It's always interesting to keep on thinking about these possibilities beyond the system that is installed until this point. I thank you, Dan Kovalik, for joining us here in United States Decides.
Thank you. Good night.
So, Professor, I would like to continue on this point that we were just discussing about that possibility of thinking beyond the two-party system. You mentioned some points before during our discussion. How do you see this perspective? Of course, our guest was just mentioning the idea that we are not talking about tomorrow. We are not talking about this election. But how's the possibility of thinking about an alternative to move past these restrictions that we've been talking about during this show?
Well, right now they make it next to impossible to get a third-party candidate on the ballot. Where I come from in New York State, you have to have 50,000 signatures of confirmed voters just to get a third-party candidate on the ballot. And there are laws in every state which stipulate this reality. That means you need volunteers, you need resources. It's incredibly difficult. So in many states, they can't get Jill Stein from the Green Party or Dr. Cornel West or any of the other candidates there. We have to continue to build the people's movement. We should never give up on the American people. I think that's one of the greatest crimes of liberalism. Liberalism known nowadays for its staples of identity, culture, politics, and cancel culture. It's fair to say that Hillary Clinton typifies this point when she called so many of the Trump-based deplorables a basket of deplorables without taking into account that it's this system and this media and its institutions, its dominant ideology that shapes people to be racist or xenophobic, to see other countries the way they do. They've never been exposed to other points. It's only 1 in 3 people in the United States that even have access to a passport. But we're trying to build that people's alternative, a people's poll. It's about popular education. It's about not giving up on the Midwest. It's about not giving up on the American people. It's about reaching deep back into our own traditions. What are the original American Revolution fought by so many working class people of the day back in 1776? What was their anti-colonial vision? What were the good things that came out of the Federalist Papers and Alexander Hamilton? How can we not throw away the baby with the bathwater, but return the American flag to the American people, because it's been usurped by the exploiters, by the genocidaires, as Dan Kovalik just mentioned. So it's going to take patience and perseverance, as about a century ago, the leaders of the Russian Revolution, that was actually their slogan: patience and perseverance, go deeper into the American people and not give up on them. That's really the only hope that we have and humanity has, because we know Zionism is not going to stop. We know whether it's the Dixiecrats or the Republicans, the genocide is not going to stop. Only us, only we could be the subjectivity, the agency that stops this genocide in Gaza and across Palestine and across the Middle East.
Precisely. Danny, speaking regarding the third parties or the third options outside of the bipartisanship that is traditional in the politics of the US, we know that it is so difficult for them, precisely because of the Electoral College, to break the ceiling, the glass ceiling that imposed by the bipartisan system. But we have to take into account, yesterday, all of them were doing alliances. They were calling one another to, for example, tell the voters to join in some states, in some regions. And, for example, the voters of Jill Stein, they were calling them to vote for other parties, to do alliances. And that is a way maybe to take away a few votes a few votes just in the states with less representatives where it are leading politics, not loyal politics and not swing states. So it means they could even a little harm, they can do a harm to the bipartisanship and they can do a little harm for one another of the candidates. What do you think about it?
Certainly we're chipping away. The numbers are by no means conclusive, but it would be a certain poetic justice, if that's the correct term. When we're talking about a Holocaust, there is no correct term. There's no poetic term when you're describing a Holocaust. But how ironic would it be that Genocide Joe and Genocidal Kamala, let's not forget, she's the Vice President of the United States. Has she ever said one word against the genocide? Has she ever critiqued the ongoing arms shipments? I mean, this is not an Israeli genocide. This is an Israeli, Western, U.S. Genocide. So if in Michigan, enough of those uncommitted voters go with Jill Stein or have a protest vote or have a boycott vote, maybe it'll come down to Michigan, and wouldn't it be amazing if the native people of Palestine had this type of, I don't want to call it vengeance, but it would be that type of poetic justice. The third-party candidates, most of the American people probably aren't even aware about Dr. Cornel West, the Harvard professor, someone who comes out of a black liberation theology, somebody who has gone across the U.S. in the name of peace, in the name of workers' rights and solidarity. This is somebody that we can actually trust, and because he actually stands up for the real workers' issues, that's why he's so sidelined and won't be on the ballot in many states because of this corporate duopoly. But hope is the last thing to be lost. We have a responsibility to always be optimistic. So there are many organizations out there that are building this momentum for the future.
So we hope like this to continue bringing this analysis, this idea, not only to follow the electoral process as we have and as we will continue to tomorrow and throughout the week because of the impact it will have in the country and of course in the world, but also to continue debating these ideas and understanding how this democratic system affects the world and also has these gaps that could be rethought from an outside perspective. So like this, we would like to conclude this special program for today in which we have gone over the key topics regarding the selection process that will take place. We'll have its highlight tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th. Professor Show, I would like to thank you for joining us tonight. And of course, we wait for you tomorrow and during this week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Of course, and Gladys as well. It's always a pleasure to anchor this with you as always.
Yeah, Belle, we will be here in this key day for US, and I think this is a crucial election for them, for the American people, but also for the international geopolitics, and we will see the outcome of this.
That is correct. So we will continue bringing everything. My name is Belen Santos, and this was United States Decides 2024.